curious how you feel about this. We have become victimized by our intellect. I just did a solo cast about this about a month ago. And I believe that it's so alluring to the logical mind, especially with like how many degrees we all have, how many podcasts we've listened to, how many books we've read, all the things that I can stack up on my shoulder and say, well, I'm smart and my brain's really expensive because I went to this school. And so I'm going to trust in my intellect. But unfortunately, what happens is we shunt the wisdom of the heart.
Yeah.
The heart and intuition can't function because all we're doing is just mashing it down with pure intellect. And I think that's really what's occurring right now in the news or news media. This is why I love your work so much. So knowing that, I'm curious how you might feel about that, first of all, the intellect versus the intuition.
Yeah.
And then how do we navigate this world that we're in without being a victim, really, of our intellectualized mind? Because it's real. I mean, I feel it myself. I see it in some of the most respected people as well. I'm not going to name names because who cares?
Totally.
We're humans. But I see it. It's present for me. Our intellect is being honored in certain ways, and it's also being totally dishonored by the fear-based media. So contrast those two.
Yeah. Well, you're totally right. Intuition and intellect historically, I mean, in recent history, mostly have battled. And we don't oftentimes acknowledge that we are a lot more than just one thing, right? So within us, we have instinct, which is also different than intuition.
That's right.
And
that's the wolf.
Right. And so instinct, I think, is a bit more rooted, grounded. It's biologically based, and it's falling back on the wisdom of evolution in a way. Intuition is that which projects out a little bit into the future a little bit more, and also draws upon stuff that we haven't physically or personally experienced in our own life. So that's how I kind of break it down. I know there's other ways to break it down, but then there's intellect. And the intellect, and so what I'm saying about this is there's a community inside of us, and they're always having counsel. But when you give one the right to speak over the other, and it starts happening more often than not, then the one that's being, kind of disrespected starts to shut up. They don't speak up at council meetings anymore. And we just forget that we can even listen to it. So then we start thinking that the only thing that exists is the intellect. And the interesting thing about the intellect is we read all these books, we go to university, whatever. We have all this beautiful intellect, and it is very beautiful. But what we forget about it is it's one part of the community that's speaking inside of us. And usually we're seeing this explode this out to society wide. What is the intellect of society? Well, right now it's this trust in science. Trust in science.
Science has become a god per se.
Science institutions. And I'll even go even further. It's not even science, it's data, because science is an aspect of consciousness. Now, there's 4 pillars of society. You go back as far as history can take you in human civilization, and as far across the globe as possible, you'll always have science, philosophy, religion, and art. And sometimes I take the R and the A and I switch them so it's SPAR. Sparring is practicing the real world situation. We all have an inner scientist. And what that is raw information coming in, raw input and impressions, and you got to do something with it. So it doesn't just sit idly by. We begin philosophizing about it. So even your child, right, 8 weeks old, raw information, witnessing the world, and then a philosophy starts building. Well, when this happens, this also happens. What's the philosophy? And, rudimentary it might be at the start, it starts becoming developed and sophisticated, and it grows with us. But then your philosophy doesn't sit idly by. You got to commit to something. What do I believe in? The philosophy brings out, what do I believe in? This is the world. Now, what do I believe in? Now, the religion is, what do I commit to? What am I devoted to? Because religare, the root of religion, religare, means to bind and to hold together. Kind of like think Mr. Miyagi and Daniel LaRusso binding that bonsai tree back together. It's one and it branches off. But if it's not actually holding tight if it's not bound to one another, then it starts experiencing rot, decay, all those things. But that can't sit idly by. Once you've committed to something, what's the final step? Acting it out, expressing it out. So the art is our expression. It's our voice. It's the way that it comes out of us. And then when it comes out of us, like a child cries, and then feedback. So the science comes right back, and we're refining that process. So science is in all of us. Science is the process to come to know things, to know science, to know. So when we say, oh, well, the science is very clear about vaccines, or the science is very clear, like, no, data is not even clear. But we're not talking about science. We're talking about data. Data is coming in, and then you have to frame the data. You have to philosophize about it. So when you frame it in a certain way, and you only frame it this way, then it's like vaccines framed this way with this data says this. And most people could be like, that doesn't say that to me at all, right? It's, and by the way, you framed it this way.
Sure.
And I'm not saying for or against. I'm just saying this is what we're hearing from the news is, like anti-vaxxers are anti-science. It's just like, no.
I feel like cherry picking exists because there is this part of our brain that's called the heuristic. It likes the shortcuts. I remember Dan Party taught me this on the podcast. We love to get the reductionized view of what's going on so that we can feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just tell me like what to believe or what I should do, then I can actually put a barrier between me and discomfort. I don't have to go through the learning process myself. I don't have to dig into the work. I don't have to do the research.
Mm-hmm.
It's really what I believe, laziness. I think we've become really lazy. And that's not to like pin a judgment beam on people and be like, we're all lazy. But I think we have become, as a society, really lazy. Look at us, man. We got everything we want at all times, like on our phone, groceries dropped off. Everything's so easy that we really have lost this ability to be in communion with the earth and with God, whatever your belief of God is.
Totally.